So, Albert, how did you start your journey in fine art?
I was married for a year, then I had a child, then I went back to Edinburgh and I got a job in a laboratory in a chocolate factory. And my intention was to work there for a year till I was 20, but during that year I took further classes in mathematics, but for one night and 2 nights of the week I went to Edinburgh Art College and I took classes in drawing and painting. And I don't know to this day, I had a choice. I could go to Edinburgh University and do mathematics, or I could go to Dundee College of Art, Dundee University. And at that time it was called St Andrews University. And I could study art there. And I can't remember the decision, but I decided to go up to Dundee, and I started 4 years doing 2 years art of all kinds of description. And then, to answer your question, in my 3rd year at art college, I had to specialize for the next 2 years. And I chose to be a graphic designer, and they had just brought in a photography teacher to do photography as a craft subject. You needed to do with your graphic design a craft subject. So it could be sculpture, pottery really, and silversmithing, or printmaking, like lino printmaking, or it could be, and the new one was photography. And of course I was kind of interested in photography, and that was my first exposure. By this time I was, my 2nd year I would have been 22, I think. And so I then started the journey at that point, and I took my first classes in photography. But the minute I had a camera in my hand, within 2, 3, 4 weeks, a month, 2 months, I was pretty obsessed by it. I knew it just felt comfortable. And I was just obsessed with the camera, you know. And that was the start of the journey. So I was lucky. I was being trained as a graphic designer, which was incredibly helpful to be a photographer, to be trained as a graphic designer. And then after I finished that degree, I went on to do postgraduate, and I was 3 years at film school in London at the Royal College of Art. But when I was at the Royal College of Art Film School, in my spare time and with the blessing of the film school, I also got to use the photography facilities at the Royal College of Art. So by that time I was well on my way to just thinking about being a photographer.
Or what gives you inspiration? What makes you creative?
I think that you're, born with curiosity if you do end up being a creative of some sort. And it's the curiosity that can drive a lot of that. That can be part of the adrenaline system. It can be part of just being inspired. And I would say that I was lucky because I found inspiration with everything that was in front of me, meaning the world itself. To this day, I'm the same. And that's why in my style of photography, I never really specialized in portraiture, fashion, landscape, still life, reportage style, studio style. I tackled all of these things. So as far as being inspired, I would say my library is about 80% art books and about 20% photography books. But then of course, if you break it down further, I have a lot of books on film and architecture as well. So all of these things, art, architecture, music, and of course movies, because I came out as a director, all of these things helped me to be a better photographer. Really.
And you have a special person or someone that you look up to that has been inspiring you as well?
I was very lucky to have a wife that was always encouraging me to do better things and taking chances, and we can go to America, for example, later, and we can go to Los Angeles, and then we had a very successful operation in Los Angeles, and then these, she said, yeah, we can go to New York now, and so on. So I had somebody there that was always there, pushing. Not in a bad way, but encouraging, I would say is the correct word. And that made a big difference. Artistically, of course, I had a lot of inspiration. I had a vast number of people say, who's your favorite photographer? I don't have a favorite photographer. I know the work of hundreds of photographers that I like, and sometimes maybe there's a photographer that I only like 2 photographs that he's done, very much. I maybe don't like the rest of the work. And other photographers, I like dozens of pictures and so on. But as I said earlier, you get inspiration from the drawings of Seurat or the paintings of Gerhard Richter, if it's Dadaism, German Expressionism, French Impressionism, the Futurists in Italy, different art movements, all the way back, Italian Renaissance, drawings of Leonardo and Michelangelo, all of that. There's endless things available now. And I'm quite surprised sometimes with younger photographers that they don't, it's so easy now to find that. You can, with your iPhone, you can just simply, if you want to look at drawings of Leonardo, you can just punch in your phone and there they are. And I'm quite amazed that a lot of young photographers don't. They have all of that at their fingertips, but they don't exercise that, But everybody works in a different way.
So can you tell us about a particularly memorable project or shoot?
Every project, has memorability. And my only regret, I think, looking back over a very long career, that I was lucky to be always in demand for magazines and commercial projects. And I wish I had maybe taken a little bit more time off and spent more time just maybe for a month working on my own projects. And I did do that. But I would like to, in looking back, I would like to have done more, I remember, obviously coming from Europe, I was fascinated by cowboys and Indians, like, any young person and also being older. So I spent 10 days photographing a very famous rodeo up in Canada called the Calgary Stampede. And I went there, with an assistant, but of course I was free to do whatever I wanted. It was my project. So very often you might work for a magazine, and the magazine, let's say if it is fashion or Rolling Stone, you have some control over that, sometimes quite a lot of control. But when you do your own project, then you really have 100% control. So the projects I've done, I had done a project for myself on Morocco, and the King of Morocco knew about that project, and he asked me to do a book on Morocco. And he didn't specify anything as long as I took the pictures in Morocco. So the only restriction was Morocco. So that was a very fabulous project. More recently, maybe 12 years ago, I spent 6 weeks on the island of Skye doing landscape, because I'd always wanted to do that, to do landscape work. And I had always done some landscape work, but I'm not a landscape photographer, and I'm not a still life photographer, but I love tackling these things because it's something new for me. So the Skye project was very big and intense. I had a crew of 3 people, and we worked 12 hours basically every day. Rain, didn't matter. Fog, wind, it didn't matter. Every day we were working. So that was a personal project. The monkey project was really fabulous. I had photographed a monkey, I got to know the monkey, and I decided that it would be a nice thing to spend a creative day doing shots of the monkey that were all my choice. You know, that was my ideas, my approach. And the nice thing was that the second time I photographed the monkey, of course, he recognized me, was very happy to put his arms around me, and was very happy that to see me again. So I spent a whole day with him doing different ideas with the monkey, and he loved it. You know, people sometimes say, were you torturing the monkey? No, it was quite the opposite. In fact, when the monkey wanted to leave, he didn't want to leave because he had so much attention from me, of course, and he enjoyed the attention, and he enjoyed doing things. So therefore he was sad to leave, so it was actually the opposite. So these are some of the projects, but there are endless ones that I've done. I'm working on a project right now that's very challenging, of flowers. And there's been flower paintings and flower photography, you know, with the paintings hundreds and hundreds of years. So it's quite challenging to try and come up with something new. And that's part of the curiosity and the creative force to do that.
What do you think makes an image have that special it factor?
I think there has to be some elements in the picture, something that grabs the human eye, and memorability is a very important ingredient. So if somebody came to see this exhibition and went right round it, walked round it, and spent a little bit of time here, maybe 20 minutes, half an hour, looking at images and moving on, going back, looking at them again, that I would hope they would remember the images. So I think a lot of times I was working quite iconically. I'm not saying my pictures were iconic, but my approach was iconic. So that gave the pictures quite a powerful look. And in fact, I worked on that from the early 80s all the way through the 90s to present day. And in fact, working that way, and the pictures did become stronger, and I hope more memorable. But a lot of the fashion editors weren't so keen on the pictures because they said they were too heavy, you know, too powerful. And one editor said they're too masculine, you know, which, I mean, maybe is a compliment. You know, I don't know.
Well, for being artworks, as in this exhibition, then you need power. You need to be special.
Yeah, as far as fashion photography is concerned, there's a journey that a photograph may take. And you take the picture, and then it ends up in a magazine. But then a picture in a magazine can really look wonderful and work very, very well in a magazine. But then it's another jump when it goes into a proper, well-printed coffee table book. It takes another jump into that. And then beyond that, when it starts to make a jump onto the wall, that's another movement, you know. And then if it goes from the wall of a gallery into the wall of a museum, then how does a shot make it all that way?
Do you have a special image that you cherish more than any other? Do you have like a favorite one, or?
I get asked that quite a lot, and I usually give the same answer because it's true, that when I was starting out, I hadn't done a lot of, you know, strong imagery. I was trying to be a good photographer. I was very frustrated. And I was in the process of spending more and more time learning techniques, which was very frustrating for me because I'm not a technical person. But right out of the blue, I got a call when I was in Los Angeles. I got a call from New York magazine, Harper's Bazaar, and they say, you know, have you photographed anybody famous? I said, no, but I would like to. And then they called back the next day and say, we would like you to photograph Alfred Hitchcock. So at that point, I was very excited to do it. Just out of film school, I was excited to meet Alfred Hitchcock. And then that project, I did a lot of thinking about it, and the project was very, very nice. You know, it was a very strong thing to do. They had a good basic idea for it, that he was a gourmet chef. Very few people knew that he loved cooking. And he was going to give his recipe on how to cook a goose for the Christmas issue. And they asked me to do him with the goose on a plate. And I called him back and said, I thought about it and said, can we do it where he's got the goose by the neck? Because then it looks like he, of course, strangled the goose himself because he was Hitchcock. And they liked that idea, and I said I can put some Christmas decorations around the neck because it's for the Christmas issue. So they loved that idea. So therefore, I did it, and it was enormously successful for me. So I think that's one of my favorite images, not because it's the best photo. You know, if I was doing that now, if it had been possible to do it now, I would do a better job than I did back then. But it gave me great inspiration that I could manage it. You know?
Okay, so you can't believe it, but you are 82 years old. But if you could go back to 20 again, would you do anything differently?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, you told me about you would prefer to do more of your own projects.
Yes.
For example.
But I think a lot of photographers would do that. They said, I wish I'd done more of my own ideas and so on. But I worked too much. I was very successful, made a lot of money. And I think I was the same age as the Beatles. And part of, John Lennon once said that time in Britain, 1960, 61, 62, most teenagers were desperate to do something with their lives, and make a statement to say, hey, I'm here. And I felt very much like that there was you wanted to make a statement about something, to be somebody, to say, hey, I'm here, have a look, So I think I was so driven by that any job that came along, I tackled. Because I had this very good philosophy that even if somebody asked me to photograph a diamond bracelet, on a girl, then I was determined to do as creative a job as I could, to make it as beautiful as possible, to make it as technically good as I could, and so on. And so job after job after job. And now when you look at the diaries from the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s, it's better now, thank God. But the diaries are insane. In one day, I remember getting up in Paris at 6:30, going to the studio at 7:30 in the morning, and I did a Vogue cover on Catherine Deneuve. And I finished the cover 9:15, and then I went straight to the airport. I got on Concorde to New York. I arrived in New York 9:30. I got to my studio just before 11. The people in the studio in New York started at 9. They did hair and makeup. And I arrived, and I did a commercial job between 10 and 4:30, 5 o'clock. I left the studio at 5 o'clock. I had a small studio in New York, and I had a big studio in Los Angeles. And I left the studio in New York, got on a plane, and went to Los Angeles. And I arrived at the studio at 9:30, almost 10 o'clock at night. And I photographed a whole bunch of musicians at that time, including Frank Zappa and Captain Beefheart, So in the one day I was in Paris, Los Angeles, And I was in Paris, New York, and Los Angeles in the one day. And people asked how I did it. I said, well, I slept on the first plane and slept on the second plane. And then I did it. But I only did that once. I would never want to do it again. You know, I don't think I could do it now. But that's an exaggerated day. But often I worked nights, did jobs at night, because people wanted me and I worked at night. Often I worked Saturday, Sundays, often. So if I could do it all again, I would not work so much, you know?
That's the answer from many people, I think. Yes.
Well, not everybody. I don't think many people were doing what I was doing. And it could be that not work so much, but I really, if you see the diaries, it was a little bit ridiculous, you know, and stressful. So I think, I don't know any other photographer who's doing that. I mean, I remember I had dinner once with Peter Lindbergh, and Peter Lindbergh said to me, "What are you doing this summer?" And I thought he was asking me what jobs I was doing in this summer. And I said, "Well, I'm working all the time." He said, "Well, when you're not taking the summer off?" And I said, "No, I'm working. I've worked jobs all over the place, mainly in New York." And he said, "Every summer I take 6 weeks off." And I've never done that in my life, 6 weeks off. I took 6 weeks off and I did the Sky project. He took 6 weeks off where he didn't touch a camera, he said. So, but everybody's different, you know? Everybody's different. I don't blame him for that. But I really would have done less, I think. I did too much. I actually think, you know, it's an interesting question, because I actually think that there's almost a stereo answer to that question. Because I was so busy and working like that, it made me a better photographer. Because of the pressure that I was under to do the work, and how I solved the jobs, how I was able to produce good quality work. Most of the time, not always, but a lot of the time I did. And so it made me a better photographer. On the other side, I wish I hadn't done so much. But it did, that pressure did make me, I think, better, more competent.
But if you would give an advice to a new up-and-coming photographer, would you give that advice, not to work as much? Or would you give any other advice?
I wouldn't tell them not to work as much. And I'll tell you why. I worked almost, I never came across anybody that did the kind of job, you know, the number of shooting days per year. You know, and I spoke to a lot of photographers that were my contemporaries, and they didn't work like I worked, like that. You know, they took time off and they finished at 5:30. They didn't do night shootings and so on. But I would say to a young photographer, I would say at least for the first 5 years when you're young, or 6 years, then work night and day on Saturdays and Sundays. In fact, if you work all week doing an advertising job, then you should be doing your own work on the weekends. So you should be shooting Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday to get some money maybe, but then you should shoot, you know, Saturday, Sunday, your own projects, and then start working, doing commercial work on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday again, and then do your own work whenever you can. Because very often I did test shootings. I'd work all day doing advertising, and I did do projects for myself in the evening. Not big projects, but specific projects. And I did that in my own time. And very often I had a crew coming that would leave at 5:30 and another crew that came in at 6 o'clock. And I would work till 11 o'clock. So I would say to a young photographer, you have to go through what you would call in English is the grind. And so many people, if you read their biographies of famous people, the vast majority of them really did a grind at some point.
Hard working.
You know, the Beatles, when the Beatles arrived in '63, people said, God, how were they so good so quickly, you know? But then when you then read the biography and you see there's basically a video that tells the whole story. It's 13 hours long. And they started playing together in 1959. So you think 1959 they were playing together, 60 they were playing together, the 61, 62. So by the time they got to 63 and they were beginning to do, Can't Buy Me Love, they'd been playing together for 5 years. And that's what I call a grind.
Yeah.
And of course they continued with that grind, and during the grind they developed into bigger and bigger and more important work.
This is maybe a hard question to think about, but how do you want your legacy to be remembered when you're not here on Earth? What would you prefer that people talked about your work or remembered you, or?
As long as they come to the conclusion that
you were good looking?
No. My father was very good looking, very handsome guy, looked like a movie star. I didn't get his looks. But I would be happy if they saw the work and said, this guy was a good photographer. I would be happy with a good photographer. He's a good photographer, that's it. I'd be happy with that as a legacy, And I'm very lucky because, and I think I was saying yesterday that if I had any fans in the future, which I certainly didn't think about 20 years, I would have probably said models, hairdressers, makeup artists, fashion editors, art directors at magazine, and at the bottom of the list might be photographers. But my biggest fans now are photographers. They really are I get the most emails, the most, and they're all asking for advice and help, and they want to know how, they send me a picture I did 35 years ago, and they asked me where the light was, to do the picture. And I said, because, a lot of time young photographers are looking for a formula. So that he said, well, he got that picture by putting the light 4 feet at an angle of 43 degrees. They think that's what got the picture, and of course it wasn't. And also, I was never lighting by. We had no marks on the floor at all. I was lighting by instinct, which is of course the best way. That means that when you light by instinct, that means that with different pictures you can do different movement across the face, because every face has a different geography, different valleys and hills and mountains and so on. So therefore, lighting you can't have a formula. You need to think about adapting that. Otherwise, if the light is too flat on people, then it gets a little bit boring, and it ends up looking like pictures from the duty-free lounge at an airport. Where it just is rather boring.
I'm thinking often that images are, they are like a time machine in stopping in time at that moment.
Sure.
And also you put in all of your energy, your creativity into one image that stays on, and maybe moving in the future to a home, and maybe to a next home, or to next place, or to a museum, and you are putting in that your energy is traveling around with that, and it's always going to be here. And I think I'm curious about that, what you put in an image and what energy it brings out.
Yes.
And it's a nice way to know that it's still here, the image of that moment in that particular time.
Yeah, but if you look at a lot of the images here, and some of them are very simple. Sometimes the picture there I'm looking at here, the picture of Sade that was done for Love Deluxe. If you look at that picture closely, it has two key ingredients. One ingredient is the graphics of the shot, the outside shape. And you say, well, everybody has the same shape, a head, neck, shoulders, and arms, you know. So it's how you would do that. But the second one, I'm using graphics, but then I'm using, since I was trained as a film director, then I'm using direction to work with her to get something emotional out of that. Not just because the previous album cover, she's always very pretty, you know, and she has very good makeup sense of her own face, and they did beautiful. But I wanted something from her that was more a moment, you know, that was, you know, what is the difference between a beauty shot and a portrait? And the portrait becomes more memorable if you get it right, even if it's simple.
So we're in the PhotoGallery, and do you have any advice for someone who's curious about buying your artwork?
Well, I mean, you mean somebody who actually buys one of the pictures? Yeah, I mean, I think the nicest thing that I would think about is that it ends up in their wall, in the place where they live, and they see it every day. For me, that's maybe the most important thing in a way, that it's a great honor that somebody will do that.
So can you tell us a little bit about your next project, or is it secret?
No, it's not secret. I haven't started it yet. As I said earlier, I'm working on the flower project, and I'm halfway through that, and I'll work on that off and on for the rest of this year, but I'll probably finish it in November of this year, 2024. But next month, I'm going to start a project for the city of Rome and the Vatican. And they have a centennial coming up next year, and I'm going to be doing a very big project that'll take about 3 months, photographing the city of Rome and the people of Rome. So it's quite, believe it or not, it sounds nice, but it's actually quite difficult to do that. It's you know, if I can put it, I mean, if you go to Rome and take a picture of the Colosseum, okay, and they would expect me to do a better picture than that, than the tourist picture. So how do you work on that to make it special or unusual, or, as I said before, memorable? So there's a lot of problems with monuments, just photographing monuments. How do I pull it into my way of seeing? How do I make it look like I took the pictures? Of course, I have a lot of technique to approach the project, and the project will take 5 weeks of shooting. It's about 40 days, and I'll start the project late at night. So for the first 10 days, I'll be only photographing through the night in Rome, which was my idea to do that. They loved the idea, and so we'll see what I can do.
And so, it will turn up in an exhibition?
It's in the biggest museum in Rome, a huge exhibition.
Wow.
And then it goes from there to a museum in Shanghai, and then they're negotiating with a museum in New York right now for the show.
Cool. Well, I want to thank you from the really bottom of my heart that you are here in Halmstad in the PhotoGallery showroom, and thank you for letting us showing your iconic work, and just to meet you is just fantastic.
I thank you for having me. I was very happy with the way you put the pictures together, because sometimes I'm not happy. This time I was happy. And it's always a pleasure to come to Sweden. I've been to Sweden quite a few times now, maybe 7, 8 times, and it's always fabulous. You know, I had the shows at Fotografiska, which were great. It was nice, and I've given talks to the, you know, Scandinavian photographers and I've been here in Hampstead now twice. So it's of course very nice to be here. I feel I'm on holiday. So anyway, I thank you for inviting me.
And welcome back.
I hope.
Oh.